Okay, everyone, 7 o'clock. It is time for us to get started. And I can tell that John is ready with his notebook. That's good. So we will pray and get right into our seminar tonight. So let's bow our heads and ask the Lord's blessing upon our meeting tonight. Dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful for this time that we had together here to study more about your will and to understand more about marriage. And Lord, that we continue to ask for your guidance, for your blessing, and that may you instruct us, may you bless our marriages and families. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Well, good evening. Welcome back. This is session number 2. Our seminar is entitled From Dysfunction to Relational Wholeness. Yesterday, our first presentation was entitled God's Plan for Marriage, God's original plan for marriage. And we explained a little bit what it means to be dysfunctional and what it means to come from a dysfunctional family background. Melissa and I have been married 15 years. And we studied theology together, and we did a wonderful premarital course together, and we were married at the age of 24, and we discovered in our very first year of marriage that there are a lot of adjustments that take place. No matter how prepared you feel you are for marriage, there are major adjustments. And one of the things we realized, if we hadn't already realized it, was that we came from very dysfunctional backgrounds, family-wise, and so that adds to the complexity. So yesterday we talked about God's plan. When Jesus was asked about marriage on one occasion, he said, let's go back to the beginning. In the beginning, God created male and female in God's image. Marriage is a partnership. Adam and Eve were created as partners to rule the earth together, to take care of the world together. Marriage in God's ideal setting is a partnership. And we talked about this concept of mutual submission. You know, in the beginning, there was a perfect harmony that existed between Adam and Eve. In the context of sin, we have a thing called conflict. And we're going to be, throughout the rest of the week, talking about how to deal with conflict. If there's no disagreement in a marriage, it means that there's something unhealthy. When two people come together, there will be disagreement. So the question is not if you're going to disagree, but learning to disagree in a healthy way. When and how, and that's what we're dealing with today. So today, we are going to talk about becoming one, because the Bible tells us, going back again, as Jesus instructed, to going back to the beginning to understand how God's ideal for marriage operates. And Jesus quoted Genesis chapter 2, and in Genesis chapter 2, verse 24, a passage that Jesus quoted when he was asked about divorce. He says, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, cling to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. So marriage, according to the Bible, is two people coming from diverse backgrounds, with very different personalities, sometimes different cultures, as is the case with Melissa and me. She's from Canada, I'm from Brazil. Two genders, and that brings complexity on its own. And you bring them together and you become one unit, and that was not easy. We thought it was going to be a lot easier than it actually was. But we're still here, and 15 years later, we're still committed to this journey, and we believe that being married has enriched our lives. We're better together than alone, but it came with some challenges. So we're going to talk about the complexities of becoming one, okay? Some of you already know all about the complexities. As a matter of fact, all too well. So we're on a journey together. As I said yesterday, Melissa and I are not up here as a model of perfection, but we are broken, and we are trying to figure this out, and we're sharing with you a few tools and concepts we've learned along the way that we found to be very, very helpful. I want to start with a video. One of the tools, Melissa, that we learned in our marriage early on for our wedding, one of our wedding gifts from one of our friends was a book called Love and Respect. We're going to introduce you to this book a little more tomorrow and the concept, but this is a little clip from the author of the book Love and Respect. His name is Emerson Eggerichs, and he talks a lot about marriage, and this little clip is going to explain some of the challenges that he and his wife faced early on as they were becoming one, coming from different backgrounds.
Fast forward, it's Christmas time. We go again to visit my parents. Sarah's a farm girl from Indiana. Her dad farmed over 2,000 acres of corn, huge operation. And she was part of 4-H and all of that. I mean, she can do it all. In fact, she was actually Miss Congeniality of Boone County. She's a sanguine personality. Life is wonderful, but she can do it all. And I didn't know it, but she had made me a jean jacket. She made it, and I didn't know it, but it's that last gift on Christmas morning, right? And so we've opened up all our presents, and now comes this last gift that she's going to give to me. And I open it up. It's a jean jacket. And I put it on. I said, thank you. And she's watching me. And she said, you don't like it. I said, I do like it. No, you don't. I said, Sarah, I like it. You don't like it. I said, Sarah, I like this jean jacket. You don't like it. I said, why are you telling me that I don't like the jean jacket? Because in our family, when we like something, we go, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I said, in our family, we say, thank you. And at a certain point, my spirit deflated. Yeah. Why? Because it was no longer about the jean jacket. I mean, that was real for her, but it was no longer the root to me. So what was the issue if the issue wasn't the jean jacket? I'll tell you in a moment.
So we see here some differences. Emerson and his family background and his personality, expressing appreciation looks a lot different from that of his wife. So Melissa, you and I got married, and you planned the wedding, and you planned the honeymoon, and you had high expectations for what we were going to do on our honeymoon, right? So why don't you tell them a little bit about how our first weeks together as a couple went. What were some of your expectations and
Well, here's one
surprises?
thing that illustrates the differences between families. So I come from a family where we love to walk. When my parents say they're going to go on a short walk, they're going to walk an hour and a half. When they're going to go on a long walk, then they'll walk 3 or 4 hours. And so my dad walks about 2 or 3 hours every day.
I love walking too, and we both, when we got married, we knew we both liked walking, so we thought, okay, this is going to be great. We're going to walk on our honeymoon.
So I rented an Airbnb beach to the foot of the Shenandoah Mountains in Virginia. We planned we're going to go for a walk, and after we've walked for about 15 minutes, he says, let's sit down.
Yeah, for me, exercise growing up was playing sports, and so I love exercise, and I love walking. For me, walking is maybe after a meal, before doing heavy brain work. You do a 15-minute stroll around the block, and that's a walk. And as she just explained, for her, a walk is a long and
It doesn't need to be arduous.
it doesn't have to be arduous, but it's you talk and it's fellowship.
So it created frustration right off the bat. It says like day 2, we've been married 2 days.
Yeah, and it's something little.
It's something little, which really shouldn't be that significant.
But you bring expectations.
And then you realize you're not that great at communicating. So you just kind of feel frustrated, but you're not sure what to say.
Yes.
And you're not sure if I have the problem or he has the problem or if there is a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Our honeymoon in general went well.
Yes.
Our conflicts right off the bat were small. It had to do with the length of our walks.
So I was planning a hike up the mountain, a little more
Yeah,
arduous, but
and-
a little more beautiful too.
And really, I didn't realize how disappointed you were until later, because we
I
still
didn't communicate that.
we really didn't have major conflicts when we were dating, and a lot of times that is the case. You know, you have your best. You put your best foot forward when you're dating. Once you get married, then it's hard to hide some of the real you. And so, yes, there were frustrations. There was another part of our honeymoon that you planned for, and it also generated some frustrations when you realized that we had different habits.
So we planned to like watch something in the evenings, except that watching stuff puts him to sleep. And watching stuff keeps me awake. And then we'd watch a movie or something, and then he would fall asleep, and then the next day he's like, let's watch it again. I didn't get the end. I was like, well, I got the end. I don't want to watch that again.
Just differences. And so we get married, we have our honeymoon in the United States. I was living in Brazil at the time, so we actually, our first 6 years of marriage was in Brazil, and that brought some challenges of its own, which we'll tell you about in just a moment. But I was working at an institution doing work for God. We both studied for ministry. We were doing mission work. And our first house, this is a picture here of Melissa's first kitchen. It must have been less than 500 square feet, the whole house. Very small, one room, one bathroom, and the kitchen and the living room is basically in one space. That's probably about the size of our bedroom today. But another difference that you and I had going into marriage, which we didn't realize until we got married, had to do with meals, which
Yes.
brought some frustration.
So he comes from a divorced context, and his mom working multiple jobs, and it was like she would cook and leave food, and you eat when you have a chance to eat. And most people just ate on their own when they had time. Whereas my family, although we had our issues, we ate together. And so we would sit and we would talk and we would all eat together at least, maybe not breakfast or lunch, but for sure at supper, everyone's together around the table. And so we would sit to eat, and he doesn't want to talk. He's like, he's never talked during a meal his
It's
whole
not
life.
that I don't want to talk. It's because,
He's
for
not
one
used to
thing,
talking.
I'm not used to talking during meals. My meals were fast.
Yes.
My meals, growing up in my house, it wasn't, you sit around the table, you talk about your day. I wasn't used to that. It just didn't exist in my home because, as Melissa said, my mom working multiple jobs. The food would be in the fridge, you warm it up yourself, you sit in front of the television, and you watch TV as you eat.
He loves watching things while he's eating.
And to this day, I love, how have we been able to manage, with differences on how we do our walks and how we watch stuff on television and how we do meals? How have we been able to work this out?
One of the things that right off the bat was a huge blessing for us was that when we did our premarital counseling and we were just first getting married, we kind of agreed that when these things would come up, we would give each other benefit of the doubt. We wouldn't assume they were being malicious. Wouldn't assume that he's not talking to me at mealtime.
It's not because I'm upset with you.
No. Yeah.
At
So
first you thought,
it still
the-
felt very odd. I was
Yeah.
like, this is just wrong. But
for me, meals was like putting gas in the car. I'm
to this
eating
day, if I
and
give
need
him-
to get back to work.
to this day, if I give him too much information at mealtime, he's like, that's enough. We'll talk about, we've been studying the country of Italy with the children, and did you know that Rome has da-da-da-da? He's like,
But we
too
do
much.
have, sometimes we do have some good
We do.
conversations. So
but
we've
we gave each other
somehow-
benefit of the doubt. So we told each other, let's always give each other the benefit of the doubt and not jump to conclusions. And that was huge. So we'd be eating, and I'd be talking, and he'd be quiet, and I was like, it's okay.
Sometimes my mind was on work, and
Yes.
I was consumed. I was worried. My job at that time was high stress.
And we had discussed some of our differences from growing up, and so I had to remind myself, and we have to remember, we have to remind ourselves constantly, like, this is how he grew up. I'm not going to change him overnight. And these are long-established habits. And so we do eat together, but if sometimes as a pastor, he'll come home late and hadn't had supper. It's 8 p.m., he's having supper, the kids are in bed, he'll put something on to watch and eat his meal.
the news, something to take my mind off of work, and it's therapy for me. And she allows for that. But on normal days, we'll sit together as a family, and so we kind of met each other halfway in that regard. There's been compromise.
That's right.
On both ends. Now, early on in our marriage, this was a pivotal and important thing that you did. You asked, are you upset? Because I was quiet during meals, and in many cases it was because there was something about work that was bothering me and worrying me. So I looked upset, but I wasn't upset at you, but you thought I might be upset at you, so you asked. Mm-hmm. And after that, when you would see me quiet and pensive, thoughtful, during meals, you didn't take it as, oh, it's me.
Right.
And
I didn't
we
take it
agreed that
personal.
if I did have something that I needed to talk to you about that had to do with you, that was making me upset, I would do that.
See, it's very easy to take things personally. As humans, we have that tendency. We're very protective of ourselves. And I'd like to tell you an illustration from some friends of mine that illustrates this very well. We had a couple friends of ours, and the husband, he needed to take some Windex to work. So he took this bottle of Windex to work, and because at work there was a lot of people, he didn't want to lose the whole bottle, he wrote his name on it. And so he wrote his name on it, and then when he was done with it at work, he brought it home and put it back in the cleaning supply. Well, when his wife opened the cleaning supply and found that bottle there with his name on it, she's like, I can't believe it, we're married and we can't share a bottle of Windex. Got to put his name on it.
It illustrates the need of assuming the best and not judging too quickly before having all the information.
If you're in doubt, when in doubt, ask. Say, hey, sweetie, why did you write your name on the Windex? And then he'll say, I had to take it to work. But they said that created quite a bit of conflict. And then what happens is one person reacts, and then the other person reacts, and then you're escalating.
It's
right?
a vicious cycle.
Rather than, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. But like, what? How could you assume that I would put my name? And then you could react, and then it can cycle out really rapidly.
So why was our first year of marriage especially challenging for you?
Well, in our case, I moved to Brazil, and so my Portuguese was very rudimentary at the time, and he had already been. He's from Brazil. And he already spoke Portuguese, and he'd been living in that house and working in that place. So we got married, moved to Brazil, and life goes on as usual for him, and I'm not keeping up.
She moved into a bachelor's pad.
And I felt, you feel when you're in a new country and you're not used to, I didn't know how to make a phone call, because the numbers were all so different. I was like, how do I make a phone call? You feel so, what's the word?
Dependent.
Yeah, dependent, yes. So I also never learned to drive stick shift, unfortunately.
And all we had was stick shifts at the time.
Yeah, and then something as simple as where do you go? Where are the best places to buy food? Where's the best place to go buy clothes? Everything is very new, and so you feel very dependent. Yeah. And then you have the language barrier.
So new country, new culture, new language, new house, new husband, new job, all in 1 year. And then there were some health issues too, which we'll talk about in a moment. And so we had a lot of challenges our first year, and I felt like all things considered, we had a great first year.
I would say so.
Partly because we were reading a lot together, and we're going to share some resources with you tomorrow.
Yeah.
Some of the tools that have really helped us along the way.
One thing that was another huge blessing for us is that on our wedding, someone gave us, we got several books. Marriage books. And, before we had kids, we had time to read.
And we have 3 of those books that we've kept all these years, and we're going to share with you tomorrow that have been instrumental.
We read them when we first got married,
yeah.
And those were huge in helping us to deal with the challenges.
Because, again, marriage is hard. If it's going to work, you have to be intentional. You have to equip yourself.
Educate yourself.
If you're going to learn to play the guitar, if you're going to learn to fly a plane, if you're going to learn to do anything that is difficult in life, you have to study. You have to train yourself. Marriage is no different. And we think sometimes that, you just stumble into it, you fall in love and everything just, happily ever after, and it just doesn't work that way. Maybe for some, but it certainly was not the case for us.
No.
So we had some challenges, which many couples, this is a huge area of challenge, and that is finances. And one of the first things you asked after, I think, we were married, maybe a little bit before, but I think it was after, within the first month or two, is, what is our budget? And I kind of gave you a blank stare, like, what are you talking about? You know, I heard that word before, but, you know, what do you mean? You know,
We should have dealt with these things before we tied the knot.
Today, as a pastoral couple, we do premarital courses with young adults who are wanting to get married, and before we marry anyone, we will do a course with them. And one of the things we deal with is budgets. And every couple should have combined finances, in our opinion, when you get married, and you have to have a budget. And we didn't have a budget,
And we didn't
so we
for a
made
long time.
a lot of poor financial choices in our first 10 years or so of marriage. And one of those was related to vehicles. To this day, we've never made a good decision regarding vehicles. To this day. And I'm at fault for that. Anything you want to say about vehicles?
Yeah, so, you know, I think we kind of touched on this yesterday, but we're going to talk a little bit later on about gift-based roles, but I'm not a car person. Like, you ask me about cars, there's red cars and blue cars and, like, white cars, there's vans and trucks, but, like, don't even ask me if it's a Honda or, like, Ford. And so I left it completely up to him. I was like, you just call the shots with the cars. But, you know, when it comes to, I would say cars enters the realm of big decisions because they affect both your life and they cost so much money. And so any big decision, even if it's not your cup of tea, you just need to be involved. As a couple, you're a partnership and you just need to think through this together. And cars is one of them.
Yeah.
And I've learned now, but our last bad decisions were brand new cars, and so we're hoping they'll last till the kids are teenagers.
Yeah. This was our first car as a couple. It's a two-door. It's a Fiat. Well, actually, you do have Fiats here in the United States now. Back then, you didn't. It's an Italian vehicle. Anyways, it was a disaster, and we learned from that experience, but not enough, because then the next car was also...
Yeah, we've had a few, like,
we've
sour lemons in
We've
there.
had our moments with cars.
But when it comes to big decisions, going back also, another thing is finances. And I think the world is changing where more and more couples are doing it together, or they're keeping it completely separate, which is another issue we'll deal with tomorrow. But like, we have a friend who, her husband did all the finances, everything. And he would ask, say, come on, sweetie, you know, I really think I should teach you, you should be involved. And she's like, later.
She trusted her husband, and he was a man of integrity.
Yeah, she kicked the bucket. Her husband passed away. And
after he retired, so they were in their early 70s. He passes away, and she's not prepared.
She never even went to the grocery store by herself.
She has plenty of money, but she just doesn't know how to deal with
So she's
life.
very vulnerable place.
Administer.
And so that's where these are kind of things that you have to do together.
Yeah.
Even for the love of your spouse.
Yeah, so I come from a family background, like I mentioned yesterday, very patriarchal. My grandfather would never consult his wife about anything related to big decisions, finances.
Or small decisions.
Or small decisions. My dad, same mentality. So really, you didn't really care to be too involved with decisions related to cars early on. And also, I didn't really consult you when I bought this car. It was just I just assumed this is my role. I buy it, and in hindsight, we could have definitely made a better decision together if we had really thought through it, talked about it. But again, you carry into your marriage a lot of baggage based on how you grew up. Your upbringing will determine how much baggage and what kind of baggage you bring into your marriage.
You have to be very intentional if you want to break a cycle, if you want to do things different than what you've always seen done.
Yeah. So another area that created challenge for us was illness. Now, early on in our marriage, you got sick, and a few close calls. I would say, maybe you were hospitalized once or twice in our first 2 or 3 years of marriage. Then after about 7 years, I had some major health issues, so bad that we had to move back to the United States. And we both had different expectations going into our relationship as to how we would want the other to care for us when we are sick. And so explain how that went.
Well, when he's sick, he wants to pretend that he's not sick.
And I don't want a lot of attention.
No, he wants to be left alone. He doesn't want any attention,
I don't really care for being nursed.
Yeah.
Unless I'm dying, which that has happened. Yeah, it's true. And our son,
which is part of why you were dying.
And Caleb and Abigail, we have a son and a daughter. Isn't it interesting? Explain to them.
Okay, so I'm the kind of person, if I'm sick, I'd appreciate you cooking something for me to eat because I'm too sick to cook my own food. Or
just asking how you're doing.
Yeah,
and
checking up.
Giving you a massage. Just
But
taking
because
care.
he hates that, if I'm sick, he just assumes I want to be ignored. And so, because that's what he wishes I would do for him. And then every time he's sick, I'm like, do you need something else? He's like, I don't need anything. And then
sometimes
ironically,
I'm not sick and you're asking me, are you okay?
Well, that's another story. And then our children are just the same. So if our daughter's sick, she's like, I'm dying. Someone help me. And then if our son's sick, he's like, he wants to be sick. He's like, Mom, can you check my temperature? Maybe I'm sick today and I can just hang out. And he likes to just be chill.
So about 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and very bad. I almost died. At one point, I weighed 104 pounds. And Melissa very faithfully took care of me under very bad circumstances. And it was only at that moment of vulnerability that I realized how important it is to be cared for when you're sick. Because when you're healthy and you take your health for granted and you've never had to be cared for, and I'm the kind of person, if I'm sick, like I have a flu or something, I just want to battle through it, and I don't want anybody to know, and I don't want attention. And so I made serious mistakes early on in our marriage because she had not as major of an illness as me with Crohn's years later, but she needed attention that I did not give.
So at one point I was sick and I was fairly ill and I didn't finish cleaning the house, and then he was a little upset because I didn't clean the house while I was sick. Because that's the way his mother is too. His mother's a person, it doesn't matter if she's sick, life goes on.
Yeah.
Like, you don't stop. It's just the way he was raised. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't anything against me. It was just, that's what he saw his mother do his whole life, and that's what he does. And so he just took for granted I would be the same.
It wasn't right, not justifying it, but I expected Melissa to be like my mother. And that's a big mistake.
Right.
I expected you to be like my mother. And today I realize, no, I didn't marry my mother. And you didn't marry your father. And that's another part of the adjustment, is realizing that you're carrying into your marriage expectations based on how you were raised.
But then when you give each other the benefit of the doubt and you don't jump to conclusions, then you don't have that.
It gives you a fighting chance to stay together. That's
now,
really
that's
what it
not
is.
to mean that you don't have to sit down and say, hey, I was really sick and I really couldn't clean, and the way you handled this really hurt me.
Yeah.
And then you have to communicate through it.
Yeah.
But it's different than assuming that they want evil and you're like they're wanting to hurt you.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Unless you're married to a narcissist or an evil person, and there are cases, we're going to talk about this throughout the rest of the week.
But
there
most
are cases
people are
where
good-willed.
you can't just assume the best. You just have to get out of the relationship. But for most people, you're married to a good person who makes well-meaning mistakes, and they really aren't intentionally trying to hurt you. And that's what's been so key for us, is assuming the best, even though sometimes we hurt each other, and we have to talk it out. And we're going to give you some tools tomorrow and the day after to how to deal with these. But what we're doing tonight is we're just illustrating that becoming one is a very messy process because we have differences. And if you marry a person of the other gender, there are already major differences. But then in our case, we have a cross-cultural marriage where you're not just marrying a person from the other gender, but you're marrying a person from another country, another language, another culture. and our families were very different as well. So we're just going to go through a list here, and as you look at this list, you are going to find that some of these differences may apply to you and your spouse. These are just differences that we have observed in ourselves and in other couples we've worked with. This is not an exhaustive list, but some of these really illustrate well. And let's just say this, Melissa, are differences a liability for the marriage, or are they an asset to the marriage?
You know, there's a proverb that says, if life gives you lemon, make lemonade. And differences can be a liability if you let them become a liability and if you let them make a wedge between you. But if you use them wisely, then they're an asset. And then you have a very enriched marriage, because then you have the best of both worlds joined together.
Yeah, so some of us in this room are spenders, and some of us are savers in relationship to money. You know, in every marriage, you're going to have a little bit of both. In some cases, both are spenders, and that's not a good recipe. You really want somebody in the family to put the brakes, and in some cases, both are savers. And then you have a couple that's very stingy. They may become very wealthy and may do very well financially, but they're not generous with, and that brings other challenges. In our case, I would say we both lean more on the saver, but we have had to make adjustments and learn. And in some cases, in certain situations, you're more of a saver and I'm more of a spender, and vice versa. Yeah. Risk taker and risk averse. I think for Melissa and me, this one has been a huge source of conflict, but also, I believe, has enriched our marriage as we have learned to meet each other halfway. Yeah, so are there any examples you can think of that I am more of a risk taker and you are more risk averse?
He's the kind of person who's like, let's save money, let's take the insurance off the cars.
Well,
and I was like, I think that it's really nice to have insurance on our cars.
Right now, we have one vehicle that's liability, and the other one is
full coverage.
And I acknowledge that was a mistake. That was a risk I should not have taken. Now, thankfully, we haven't taken a hit on that loss, on that risk, but we left ourselves vulnerable, and she persuaded me. That was not a good move.
So
our life insurance right now is probably lower than it should be because, again, I take that risk. Let's pay less on the premium, assuming we're not going to die. And she's like, well, what if we do die? and
he's like, she wants me to die, he says. It's not that I want you to die.
Yeah.
I just want to be prepared if you do.
Yeah.
So when we bought our house in Kansas, I would have just rented and like really gotten to know the place so I can really pick a house. And he's like, no, we're buying now. We got 1 week to pick a house. And so that's his risk side. He's like, it's a risk, but...
So what we ended up doing, I would have bought the house of our dreams. You wanted to just rent. You didn't want to take the chance because it was our first house. I didn't have really great salary, and so we were going to be really tight. We met each other halfway, didn't we? What did we end up doing?
So where he would have wanted a 30-year mortgage and I wanted to rent, we went for a 15-year mortgage because I felt like that would keep us within our budget more, our total house budget. And, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, a 15-year mortgage was a little more of a risk, but it was still, we bought a real simple house.
Yeah, so
whereas I wanted a more expensive house.
That's why I said the
that would
total
have been
house
risky.
budget.
Yeah, so this is just to illustrate that I believe, in our case, you being risk averse and me being a risk taker, though it has sometimes created heated debate, it has been an asset to our marriage. But we need to learn how to communicate in order for it to become an asset.
Or else it just becomes a liability if it's only just creating.
Melissa is more of a social person than I am. I'm an introvert. I'm a pastor, but I'm an introvert, believe it or not, and that is possible. It's common. Yeah, I have several pastor friends who are also introverts. I'm very happy to have a wife who is very social. I remember, though, my first time attending a wedding with Melissa, and at the reception, I was done. by halfway through the reception. If you're an introvert, you're not energized by being around people all day. But if you're a social person, you're energized by being with people. And Melissa, she enjoys a good social gathering. And so we balance each other out. I'm thankful to be married to someone. As a pastor, I need someone like Melissa that is mingling with people. And I mingle with people, but I can only handle so much.
But then you have to know the other person so that you give them the space they need. Space for him to have time alone and space for me to have time with people. You know, you've got to know each other so that you can give each other that space.
I am more of an impulsive person. You are definitely more calculated.
It goes with being risk-averse.
That's right. They're related. So we moved to Montana, and I'm just ready to furnish the house, and let's just, buy furniture. We bought a table, and you felt like that was an impulsive choice. You wanted to take, when we're shopping, you want to spend time. You want to see all your options.
I read all the reviews.
You're very calculated. I get on Amazon, the first
thing he sees, he buys.
First thing I see that I'm looking for, I feel like I don't want to spend too much time shopping. And so I'm more impulsive. You're more calculated.
So I hope you guys are seeing in each other, who's what kind of characteristics you have as couples,
and some of
or
you,
as individuals.
Some of you may be the same, and that's okay too, but then you have to recognize that can be a liability itself.
Yeah.
So realism versus optimism. I am sometimes overly optimistic about the risks that I'm willing to take, and you're a realist. You help me. I have dreams. You help me see the potential challenges, risks. Sometimes I call it pessimism, you call it realism, and I believe that a lot of times it's realism, and I'm overly optimistic, and an overly optimistic person needs somebody that can help them see the negative side, the potential cost and risk to
And again,
a big
going
decision.
back to communication, you have to learn, we're going to be talking tomorrow or after tomorrow about asserting yourself.
That'll be Friday night,
About asserting yourself, because when you're first married, I found a lot of couples, it's just so hard to really, express how you feel. And so I'll just give you a little idea of the kind of optimistic things that we did. And when my son was born, 6 weeks after he was born, 6 weeks, I think, we went to Brazil. We flew to Brazil. He was 6 weeks old, just to get the passport. I won't even tell you what we went through to get 2 passports in 6 weeks.
I bought the tickets.
Or maybe a little older than
I bought
6.
the tickets before we had the passports.
Was he 8 weeks old?
He was. It doesn't matter.
Might have been 6
He
or
was
8,
too-
somewhere
he
there.
was too young.
6, 7, 8 weeks old. We came back from Brazil on a Sunday night, okay? Sunday night we came back to Brazil, D.C. The next day we drove to Montreal, 14 hours. And we spent 3 days at my parents' house. Thursday we drove back. Okay, it's Thursday now. On Sunday we're moving, we're leaving the state, and
We
I have to
moved to
pack up the
Montana.
whole house during camp meeting.
with
I have
a newborn.
I have Thursday and Friday, a newborn, a 2-year-old, and I have about half my house packed, the other house needing to be packed during camp meeting to leave at the crack of dawn on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
So he was very optimistic.
Melissa is
And I was not assertive to say, hey, I think that's too much with a newborn.
Melissa is a let's arrive at the airport 3 hours before the flight kind of person. I am let's arrive at the airport 1 hour before the flight kind of person. This is an example of compromise. I think we shoot for 2 hours in our and that's really a compromise. I can't stand to arrive 3 hours early and sit at the gate for an hour and a half. But that gives her comfort because she doesn't have to go through the stress. I am energized by adrenaline. I like whitewater rafting, and
I hate adrenaline.
I don't like.
Yes, loves that. He thinks that's the
I love the
best
feeling. I love the feeling of sitting down inside my plane, knowing I barely made it. I don't like the actual, but yeah. So I'm overly optimistic. I needed to be married to a pessimist, realist. And it's really enriched I think it enriched. Now, I believe that perhaps, if you had married a pessimist, you
We'd
might
always be there 3 hours ahead.
and you might have never bought a house.
And I might have just been renting the whole time.
You know what I mean?
A red one. Automatic.
So let's say this, diversity. we believe it is an asset. It can be an asset, not a liability. But it all depends on the tools you have to work with in trying to sort through these differences.
So we really want to challenge you in your marriage to find what are the differences
Write them down.
and how do they enrich you as differences. Really think through that. The differences that could be a challenge, but how really they can be a asset and an enriching. He's from Brazil. As a result of living in Brazil, I believe that we're more hospitable. We're the kind of people like, hey, you can sleep on the couch. We'll make room for you. We'll add water to the beans. You can come and eat at our house anytime, day or night. I don't care if the house has been cleaned or not. That's a Brazilian heritage. But we're also more punctual.
Because I married a Canadian. So
We make it to events on time.
our meals are enriched through multicultural.
We have-
And think about your potlucks. If you are in a multicultural versus a monocultural context.
You can
and-
have some pancit here, some Jamaican patties.
So diversity is a blessing. It is an asset, but it's also a liability, and you have to understand the risks.
You decide if you want to make it a liability or
So
a
let me give
blessing.
you an example about Brazil and the differences. You had a lot of things that you had to learn moving to a new culture. In Brazil, there's a lack of punctuality, as we mentioned. One time we were going to a birthday party. It was a Brazilian birthday party. We were actually living in Kansas City, but it was a Brazilian birthday party. And Melissa, being from Canada and having been raised by her parents, punctuality is very important, especially her mother. So you actually arrive 10 minutes before. You don't actually arrive right on time. And in Brazil, it's very appropriate to arrive 30 minutes after the scheduled time.
You are
So
not to arrive before.
we were invited to a birthday party, and so on that day, you insisted we arrive early.
No, we arrived on time.
We arrived on time, but we are early on time. We arrive at 4 o'clock.
We arrived at 4 for a 4 o'clock party.
We arrived at 4 o'clock for a 4 o'clock party, but it was a Brazilian
No one else showed
birthday
up for
party.
another hour.
Not only did no one else show up until 4:30, the host was taking a shower when we arrived. It was announced at 4 o'clock, and so.
It was announced at 4 o'clock for, yeah.
But we've been working through these, and we're getting there. That's right. The Bible teaches that there is a blessing in diversity. Paul, when he's writing to the Corinthians and he's talking about the many members, and he uses the body as an example of the importance of diversity. Imagine if your body parts were all made of fingers. It's nice to have toes and feet and fingers and hands, and then you have the internal organs, and they all have different roles, different functions, and each part working together enriches the body. The body is one and has many members. And he also repeats the same idea. The body does not consist of one member, but of many members. And look at this, 1 Corinthians chapter, this is actually chapter 14. This is a typo. So if you're taking notes, make a correction. It's all chapter 14. I'm sorry, it's right, chapter 12. Sorry.
You've been studying Corinthians
Yes,
a lot.
I've been. So the reference is correct, chapter 12, verse 17. If the whole body were an eye, where would be the sense of the hearing, or of hearing? If the whole body were an ear, where would be the sense of smell? Now think about this in the context of marriage. What if I had married somebody exactly like me? Would I be better or worse? Sometimes we think if I could just make her be like me, I would have less conflicts in my marriage. That's not healthy thinking. You don't want a replica of yourself. You don't get married because you want a carbon copy of you. You get married because you are going to become a better person as you too bring your gifts, your abilities, your diverse and peculiar features to the union. If all were a single member, where would the body be? Now, this is in relationship to the church, but apply this in the context of marriage. So cross-cultural communication, this is a challenge, and we have, by God's grace, been able to learn a lot about our different cultures. So yesterday we talked about roles, and we're talking about the difference between gift-based versus gender, traditional, culturally determined roles. Unpack that a little more.
Yeah, so I think that the trend is shifting in culture today, but we know that traditionally, and studies still show that when a woman works full-time and a man works full-time, the woman tends to bear more of the house burden. Laundry, meals, cleaning, children. It's still, even though I think that culture is starting to shift a little more, it's still overall, statistics show that that's where things lean. And, but I strongly believe that when you look at your marriage and what you two have to bring to the table, that you shouldn't limit yourself to traditional gender assigned roles. Wife cooks, husband does the mechanic. We mentioned that yesterday. But you really want to look at what are your gifts? What do you enjoy doing? And who is more capable of things. And I read the story about a couple which I thought was fascinating. This is a story from British Columbia, and the husband was a teacher, very good school teacher, except that his health was kind of poor, and he was from Quebec, and he moved to British Columbia. And he met his wife, and she was from a ranching family. And long story short, they got married. He didn't have the stamina for being a rancher, but his wife loved ranching, and she had the stamina. She didn't have much of an education, but he was an excellent teacher. They had kids. She ran the ranch, and he schooled their children. And they were the best educated kids in that whole county because he was a very good school teacher. And, that worked for them. She was happy doing that, and they had a wonderful, successful ranch. And that's probably not the average couple. And it's not about what's average, what's common. It's about what you two are like and what you enjoy doing. So, think outside of the box and look at your gifts and look at what you enjoy. Look at where you thrive. And I do like the comment that was mentioned yesterday. There's some things that no one likes to do. And then you have to talk it out and share things fairly and equally. And that will change. Before we had children, I packed his suitcase. And after we had kids, he's like, honey, you haven't packed my suitcase in a long time. I said, sweetie, I got 3 suitcases to pack now. You can pack your own. And so there's different seasons of life within your marriage, and you have to allow room for change throughout your married life. And so don't be static. What's the contrary of static?
Dynamic.
Dynamic.
There's no job that should be beneath the dignity of a man. And other than biological limitations, I really believe that there's really no role that should be limited. I mean, Melissa is not gifted with auto mechanics, but there are some wives who are better at overseeing the maintenance of the vehicles than men. There's no shame in that, because we're talking here about a gift-based approach to roles. As we've rethought this, it hasn't diminished our marriage, it's enriched our marriage. I come from a background where my grandfather and my dad would never touch dishes or step into the kitchen other than to eat. And we believe that is really not a biblical model. It's a patriarchal and secular cultural model that we've inherited from centuries of men oppressing women, not something that we find in the Bible.
But you got to work with what's convenient for your family.
Yeah.
So when I worked full-time one year in Kansas, and he did laundry. And now he's working full-time and I'm not, and he's also going back to school, so he hasn't washed clothes very frequently recently. So yeah, just
but I wash
be dynamic.
dishes sometimes.
You wash dishes sometimes.
Not a lot, but sometimes, yeah. Well, we want to take some time to dialogue with you, answer questions, allow you to give feedback or share some questions.
And then
we're going to have an exercise in just a few minutes, and then we'll be done. So anyone have a question that you'd like to ask? Yes, sir.
I have some advice for her. You like to take your walks, so when you go to a new country, this is what I do. I just sit and I'm going that way. Just keep walking, you'll see stores, all kinds of stuff, talk to people.
Where are you going?
And you'll find the stores. So you get your hour and a half walk one way
Fica
for
aqui.
45 minutes and walk back. You'll see stores, you'll get to know the actual people, and you don't have to worry about you can't drive a stick shift.
We lived out in the country. It was a little harder. I'd have to walk.
There you go.
I'd have to walk several miles to
Anyone
get to town.
else? Yes.
I don't know if I missed this, if you spoke about this, but how long did you guys date? That you like, cause like the walking thing that you.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We dated long distance. So that's a great question because you think you had sorted this out while you were dating, right? So we had about 1 month where we actually dated together, and we went to the zoo and we did a lot of things together, but somehow this did not come up. We went to college together, so we knew each other well, relatively well, because we took a lot of classes together. I was living in Brazil and she was living in Europe and in the United States, so most of our dating life was apart.
Yeah,
And
so
that's-
and this was like, we were together about a month, but it was that butterfly month, you know, was that. and then-
Everything is fine. You know, when you start dating, you overlook all the defects.
Yeah.
And then once you get married, then the defects become obvious.
And
that's
then,
just dynamic.
you know, there wasn't as many options for like when he was in Brazil, he didn't have internet, and so I'd have a phone card. Remember the phone cards we used to buy, and call him once a week. Just talk for about an hour once a week, and then I went to Brazil
Giancarlo,
once.
we need the exercise on the table when you get a chance. Yeah, we're just about ready.
And then he came to the United States a week before the wedding.
Do you think if you guys had not been long distance, some of these things would have been more settled?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I think so.
that's a good point.
Although, even if you're dating, you know, without a long-distance relationship, you will still have surprises.
Yes.
There will be some, there is no marriage that, even people that live together before they're married, which we don't advise, they find a lot of challenges. And a lot of those marriages end up in divorce, so, more so than you would think that, okay, you're already living together, so now you increase your chances of, but that's not the case. It's an interesting dynamic.
And then some people date. So we've counseled with several couples that you ask them, what was your dating like? We went out to eat a lot. You know, it's at the restaurant. It's not real life. And so another thing that's very helpful is if you can get into situations of difficulty. You know, if your car breaks down together, that's wonderful to get to know each other before.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And we really didn't have any of those moments while we were dating, which it would have been good to have to see each other's character in a crisis moment. You're getting a handout. For those of you that weren't here last night, we're going to be doing an exercise together every night, especially for couples, but you can fill it out. If you're not married, you can think about how you envision roles. This one here is based on roles. And so if you're married and you're here tonight, I'd love to hear what the roles are in your dynamic, and fill it out without peeking at your spouse's exercise. We'll still ask a few more questions if anyone would like to ask a question while... Yes, ma'am. Comment, yes.
Spirit of Prophecy said something like this: marriage is not to make us happy, it's to work on our character. And that's what I'm hearing here.
Yes.
It's not like you get married and everything's perfect and everything's compatible. What it is, and I'm thinking also the preferring others more than yourself. So this is what goes on in marriage. You have to prefer each other to work it out and compromise.
That's right.
Yeah.
Happiness comes from doing that, because more blessed to give than receive.
That's right.
So it kind of does work
Yes.
out, but it's not like you get married because, we're
Yes.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes.
If
There's
you
a
have
phrase.
If you're only thinking of yourself, it's a bad for
A
marriage.
selfish approach to marriage usually ends badly.
Reminds me, when are you going to be talking about narcissism?
Friday night.
I will not miss it.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Very timely.
So if you weren't here last night, I shared a little bit about my family background, and so my father is a narcissist, and so my mother divorced when I was 5, and he's going through a divorce now with his current wife, and she needed to have done that a long time ago. There's abuse and there's just behavior that is unacceptable, but sometimes you think you have to stay in it, and sometimes the problem needs to be diagnosed and people need to be given the freedom to walk away. So on Saturday morning, I'm going to be talking about forgiveness. Forgiveness does not require reconciliation.
Does anybody else need a pen?
We have handouts and we have pens. If you need a handout or a pen and you didn't get one, just raise your hand. So in about any other questions? Anyone else would like to ask a question? All right, as you're filling that out, I'd love to hear from some of you in just a moment. You can, yes, you're welcome to, because you could either talk about what your marriage was like or what you would like your
What are your
marriage to
kind
be
of
like.
rules?
Yes, sir. Yes. Great question. Great question. One together, yeah. Okay, so I'm going to share with you our philosophy. Maybe I'll let you start first, Melissa.
Yeah, we found that it's better to have joint, although it's good to have within the budget maybe a small discretionary fund so that each person can spend, if I want a new pair of shoes, I just buy my pair of shoes. But overall, to have shared finances, that's part of becoming one flesh. It's part of showing that you have complete trust in each other. Marriage is built on trust. If you don't trust your partner enough to share money, there's some deep issues, going on. And you need to sit down together and talk about how you're going to use your money. And so ideally, we believe that money should be shared, but it's okay to have some separate money, not large quantities, like not the most of your money, but for some discretionary money. Having said that, we found with a lot of older couples that are remarried that sometimes they might need prenuptial agreements because you have inheritance and children, and it can get very muddy and very complicated when you have two sets of people with families and built up estates and then getting married.
So whatever was acquired before and you're getting married for the second time,
and you have children,
and you have separate children, then whatever was acquired before the marriage really needs to be divided between each individual child. But in an ideal situation, you're getting married for the first time. So Melissa and I, we have one checking account. Her paycheck and my paycheck are deposited into the same checking account. We both have access to it. All our accounts are joined, and we have a budget that we both work out together. So the sum of both of our paychecks, that's our income. All of our expenses are agreed upon.
There's no his money and her money. It's
we're going to
our
spend
money.
$500 a month on food, and we're going to spend $50 a month on clothes, and $70 a month on our pets. And our budget is agreed upon together, but one of us, and sometimes it's been her, sometimes it's me, right now it's me, is the treasurer of the home. In other words, I'm the one that pays the bills. I'm the one that
processes. So everything we buy, we
expenses.
process to make sure we're staying within our budget.
But I don't make big, expensive decisions without her, nor does she without me. Anything outside the budget, we consult each other.
And what we found is that it shows trust and it builds accountability. So you have a lot of these situations of men or women that are cheating on their spouse, and it's easier because they have a totally separate bank account that allows them to do things without their spouse knowing. And so this brings transparency to the relationship. We have nothing to hide from each other. I know all his passwords. He knows all my passwords. In an ideal situation, you have that complete trust because
Yeah. So when we do courses with couples who are going to get married, we go through these details with young couples that are planning on getting married, that want to start on the right foot. Having combined finances is a key ingredient to a healthy marriage. That's our philosophy. That's how we see it. It's worked really well for us. Good. Yeah. Thank you for asking, though. That's
excellent
important.
Question.
All right. Well, let's go through this. Would anybody care to share some of what's on your list? Things you do for your household, things your partner does for your household. And maybe we can start. Why don't you share one thing? You already mentioned a few things. What are some things you do? You said laundry.
I order the children's homeschool curriculum. So I go online, I research.
I mow the grass. I handle the car maintenance.
I walk the dog.
We both walk the dog.
I walk the dog more frequently.
You walk the dog more than I do, yes. So yeah, let us hear from you. Anybody would like to share? Not everyone has to.
I
but
cook the
we'd love to
meals.
hear from
I
someone.
do most of the dishwashing, but I don't touch the cars. I don't change the oil. I don't
And by the way,
hardly even put gas in them.
By the way, even though I've mostly been the one that has been in full-time employment during our 15 years of marriage, she's worked on and off for 15 years, but it's not, there's no this idea, I make the money and she just stays home. That doesn't work. What enables me to work is to be able to have a healthy home. And so a homemaker is a career and is just as important as the one that gets the paycheck. So that's our philosophy. So some of these myths have to be broken. There isn't, I'm the one that makes the money. It's not his money, her money. It's, you know. So yes, anyone would like to share your roles? Yes.
My wife folds the clothes.
She folds the clothes. Who washes the clothes?
I wash the clothes.
Okay.
I clean the house. I do all the cooking. I do the yard. I pick up the dogs. I do literally everything. I pay every.
But you don't fold the clothes. So you don't do everything.
Everything she does is fold the clothes.
And you,
So you
and
don't do everything. You do,
you cook the food.
I do everything. Everything.
okay. Since she's not here to defend herself, let's go to the next one. Who else would like to share? Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I cook and do the dishes. I'm a fanatic about dishes.
Okay.
I don't like no.
You like them done a certain way.
It's not, I just put boiling water, I don't like the dishwasher. I want to wash my dishes till they're hot, clean, almost disinfectant.
All right.
You can't touch that.
You're a lucky man. I don't hear any complaints from you on that one.
I don't want him cooking and listening.
All right.
When we go out to dinner,
Okay.
I usually am the treater for dinner.
Okay.
But he pays the household bills.
Okay.
Since an accident, I suffer from PTSD. I don't drive.
He's the driver. Okay.
He does the laundry and he vacuums.
All right.
I do mopping.
All right.
Yeah, he cleans one bathroom, I clean another.
Sounds to me like you're a great team. I love it. Do you have anything
I
that?
was here too. It wasn't.
All right. So how about you? Yeah.
I can understand that, when she does the dishes and stuff, but a couple of times I think she got sick or something, so, I have to
Yeah.
so it's a little different there.
Yes.
I put the soap, a lot of soap in
Yeah.
the dishes, one time I just put less, and you could see, like,
Yeah.
the dishwasher tight. So I started pounding the soap on, and it's gonna chill out.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Every time I work in the kitchen, I feel like I'm not in my element. And my kids, they feel it. They know when Dad's in the kitchen,
can't
and when
even
they know
watch.
the difference.
And he grew up
Yeah.
very, very poor, so anything I cook,
Yeah.
he eats. He doesn't, and he'll always say, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice.
Not to say that it's always the case that the woman is the best person in the kitchen, right? We have met a few couples where the man is more gifted in the kitchen, and that's where we go back to gift-based roles. It is not biblical that the woman cooks and the man doesn't. This is not a biblical it's cultural. And so we don't allow the culture to determine how we run our household. We want to derive principles from the Bible and not culture.
Any last sharing?
Yes, anyone
We're
else?
wrapping up here
yes,
on
ma'am.
time.
All right.
Oh, there you go. We have one right
And
here.
are you happy with that arrangement? Yeah? Both? Okay, good. Yeah. Great. Yes.
Question.
Yes.
So what do you tell a couple, let's say, the man says, the man is the head of the house. The Bible says,
Yes.
the man is the head of the house. How do you answer that?
Boy, we answered that last night.
I wasn't here. So
Okay, well, we have the recording. It will be available.
I'd like to have.
So I did unpack that last night, but if you want even more, we can talk in private. And yes, yes. Any more examples of roles in your home based on the exercise? Yes, ma'am.
With us, we actually share most of all the roles.
Okay.
Nice.
Because it just depends. Like if I'm home when the sun's going down and it's getting dark and the
Yeah.
lawn needs to be cut, I cut it.
Okay.
And we do that a lot, even with the trash.
Yeah.
We don't have specific roles.
Yes.
Work with whatever.
You know what the advantage of that is? You know, God forbid something happens to the other, you're really better prepared for the adjustment. You know, when
Share like that.
you're not dependent on the other for everything.
But that's beautiful.
That's wonderful. We kind of try to do that ourselves. We step in. If she's going to be gone for a few days, I got to step into her role. And so constantly improving areas that you're weak in. Yes. All right. Well, we're 5 minutes over. If there aren't any more questions and anyone else, I don't see any more hands. Thank you for coming out another night. Tomorrow we're going to be talking about some differences, not between people in general, but between men and women. These are specific gender-based differences. We believe that we're not just different biologically. So some of the things we'll talk about may not be necessarily politically correct. You know, we want to some people confuse equality with sameness. I believe, Melissa believes, we believe in equality between genders. We're not feminists, but we believe equality. We believe, going back to Genesis 1 and 2, the Bible teaches equality. They were both created in God's image, and they were both as partners to be given dominion over the earth as partners. But we don't believe in sameness. God created them female and male. There is a difference between the sexes, and it's not just biological.
And
so tomorrow we're going to
understanding
talk
these will be
about
helpful.
Yes, you're going to understand a little better, and we're going to talk about some of the resources that have helped us understand better the differences between men and women. So Melissa, why don't you pray for us as we close tonight?
Kind Heavenly Father, thank you that you've made this world so rich in diversity. And we pray that in our marriage and in all our relationships, we will not cause conflict because of diversity, but rather appreciate it and use it to enrich us in all ways possible. Be with us tonight and help us, Lord, to learn to love everybody. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Thank you again. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Yes, ma'am.